It's been years since that night, but even now, just thinking about it sends a chill down my spine. Some memories don't fade with time, they stay with you, buried deep, resurfacing when you least expect them. I was only 23 back then, just finishing college, figuring out life, and still holding on to the belief that family meant safety. But that night changed everything. It twisted my understanding of trust, of loyalty, and of the hidden darkness people can carry behind polite smiles. It started like any ordinary evening. My father had a small get-together at our house, just a few close friends from work, men I had grown up seeing around. They were always warm, always respectful. I didn't pay much attention to them when I was younger, but now that I was older, I noticed things. The way some of them looked at me a second too long. The way their compliments felt more loaded than innocent. But I brushed it off. These were my father's friends. I trusted them because I trusted him. That night, my father's closest friend, Mr. Grant, was among the guests. He had known me since I was a child. He had watched me grow up, celebrated my milestones, and always treated me like a daughter. But something was different that evening. Maybe it was the way he looked at me when he thought no one was watching. Or maybe it was how he lingered in conversation just a little too long. I felt uncomfortable, but I couldn't explain why. I kept telling myself it was nothing, that I was overthinking. As the night wore on, most of the guests left. My father went to bed early after having a bit too much to drink, leaving me alone to tidy up the living room. Mr. Grant was still there, sitting on the sofa with a half-empty glass of whiskey, saying he wanted to finish his drink before heading out. I said it was fine, that I'd just be cleaning up. But something about the way he watched me, quiet, still, his eyes fixed, made me uneasy. We ended up talking for a while. At first, it was just small talk. Then, out of nowhere, the conversation turned personal. He started bringing up memories from my teenage years, calling me beautiful in ways that didn't feel fatherly at all. I laughed it off nervously, trying to change the subject, but he kept pushing, crossing boundaries with each word. I didn't know what to do. I felt frozen, shocked that someone I trusted could suddenly feel like a stranger. What happened next still plays on repeat in my mind. It wasn't violent, and he didn't touch me, but the words he said, the way he leaned in too close, the way he made me feel like prey, it was enough to scar something inside me. That night didn't end with anything obvious, no dramatic scene. But it shattered something I once believed about people, especially the ones closest to us. And what's worse, I never told my father. 4 weeks after that night, I pretended everything was normal. I went about my days with a forced smile, nodding along during family dinners, answering my dad's texts like nothing had changed. But inside, I was stuck in a loop, replaying that night, wondering if I was wrong to feel what I felt. Mr. Grant hadn't done anything technically wrong, not in the way people usually define it. But it was the way he made me feel unsafe in my own home, the way his words hung in the air like smoke, impossible to ignore. My father continued talking about him with nothing but admiration. "That man's like a brother to me," he'd say proudly. "He's been there through everything." And it made my skin crawl. I wanted to scream, to say something, anything, but I couldn't bring myself to break my father's trust. I kept thinking, what if he doesn't believe me? What if he thinks I misunderstood? Or worse, what if he already knows and just ignores it? I started noticing more things. Mr. Grant would text me occasionally, innocent things at first, like "hope you're doing well" or "tell your dad I said hi." But then the tone shifted. Subtle compliments. Late-night messages. Always polite enough to not raise a red flag if anyone saw them, but I knew what he was doing. He was testing the line, waiting to see how far he could push without getting caught. I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, jumping at the sound of my phone, anxious whenever my dad mentioned that Mr. Grant might be coming over again. The thought of facing him, of having to act like nothing ever happened, made my stomach twist. But I said nothing. I swallowed it down because I didn't want to bring chaos into my family. I didn't want to be the reason my dad lost someone he trusted so deeply. But behind closed doors, I was falling apart. My sleep was broken. I stopped going out. My mind was drowning in what-ifs. What if he had said something to my dad? What if he was twisting the story, painting me as the one who was being inappropriate? That fear haunted me. I knew how people talked. I knew how quickly the story can be flipped. And then one evening, out of nowhere, Mr. Grant showed up at our house again, uninvited. I remember hearing the doorbell ring and my father's surprised voice welcoming him in. I was upstairs. Frozen. My heart pounded in my chest as I heard their footsteps below. That night wasn't over, not yet. I didn't go downstairs. I couldn't. I stayed in my room, sitting at the edge of my bed, trying to listen through the floor. I could hear my dad laughing, clinking glasses, chatting like everything was fine. Like nothing had happened. But I knew. And I knew Mr. Grant knew I was upstairs. That made it worse. It felt like a silent threat, his presence alone a reminder that he still had control, that I hadn't said a word, and he knew I probably wouldn't. I started to question everything about my past. Had he always been like this? Had I just never noticed? I remembered birthdays when he'd give me gifts that felt a little too personal. I remembered a time when I was 16 and caught him watching me from the hallway when I thought no one was looking. Back then, I dismissed it. I thought maybe I imagined it. But now those moments felt clearer, heavier, like puzzle pieces that were finally clicking together, and the picture they formed made me sick. Outside of home, things weren't much better. I had started dating someone new, Daniel. He was kind, attentive, and for a while, I let myself believe that maybe this new relationship could help me feel normal again. But I was distant. I kept pulling away without meaning to. Daniel would ask what was wrong, and I'd brush it off with just tired or long day. But the truth was, I didn't know how to let someone close again. Trust didn't come easy anymore. And even when I was with him, there was always that fear, what if he ends up like Mr. Grant? Meanwhile, Mr. Grant's presence kept growing. He started showing up more, dropping by with excuses to see my dad. Sometimes he'd bring over food, or ask for help with something work-related. My dad, of course, welcomed him every time. I could see how much he valued the friendship. That made my silence feel heavier. I wasn't just protecting myself anymore, I was carrying the weight of possibly destroying something my father truly cherished. Then one afternoon, I overheard a conversation between them. My dad said something like, "Your family, Grant. I don't know what I'd do without you." And Mr. Grant replied, "I'll always look out for what's mine." That last word, mine, made my heart stop. I wasn't sure if I had heard it right. But if I had, what did he mean by that? From that moment on, everything changed. I couldn't unhear it. The way he said mine echoed in my head for days. It felt possessive, calculated, like I was some prize he believed he had earned. That wasn't a slip of the tongue, it was deliberate. And now I was sure that what I felt that night hadn't been in my imagination. He had crossed a line in his mind long before I ever realized it. My anxiety spiraled. Every knock at the door made my pulse race. I started avoiding being home whenever I thought there was a chance he might visit. I made up excuses to stay out late or spent hours at coffee shops just to avoid running into him. But the strange thing was, he never texted again. Not a word. It was like he didn't need to anymore. His silence spoke louder than his messages ever did. It felt like a silent game, he was waiting for me to break first. One weekend, my dad invited a few friends over for a backyard dinner. I knew before he even said the names that Mr. Grant would be there. I tried to say I had plans, that I wasn't feeling well, but my dad insisted. He said, "You never spend time with the family anymore. They miss you." I didn't have the strength to argue. So I stayed. but everything inside me was screaming to run. That evening, I wore a plain outfit, barely spoke, and kept my distance. Still, I felt his eyes on me. Watching. Waiting. He acted like nothing was wrong, joking with the others, helping my dad at the grill, making small talk like he didn't have this secret power over me. That was the worst part. No one else could see it. To everyone else, he was just a good friend, loyal and kind. But I knew better. Later that night, my dad stepped inside to take a phone call. I was left alone in the yard, and within moments, Mr. Grant walked over to me. He didn't say anything at first. Just stood beside me, close enough that I could feel his presence pressing in. Then, quietly, he said, "You haven't told him." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Calm. Cold. Like he knew he was still in control. My breath caught in my throat. My hands trembled. And then he added, "You won't. You know why." And I did. But in that moment, I also realized something else. Something that was about to change everything. I stood there frozen, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. The way he said it, "You won't. You know why," wasn't just a reminder of his confidence, it was a threat hidden in plain words. And he was right. I hadn't told my dad. I didn't want to shatter the image of the man he considered a brother. But what he didn't know, what I had just realized, was that I wasn't the only one he had been watching. A few days earlier, while I was helping my father organize some old documents in his study, I had come across a small photo tucked inside a folder. It was nothing out of place at first glance, just a group picture from a family barbecue years ago. But there, in the background, almost out of frame, was Mr. Grant. And he wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking at my mother. Not just looking, staring. The same way he looked at me now. The realization hit me hard. My mother had passed away when I was 16. I had always believed it was sudden, a tragic accident during a solo road trip she took to clear her head. But now I wasn't so sure. The timing suddenly felt off. My mother's car crash had happened just weeks after a dinner party, one that, according to an old photo album, Mr. Grant had also attended. I never connected the dots before, but something about the way my dad had avoided talking about that night always stuck with me. Back then, I thought he was just grieving. But maybe there was more. Maybe my dad knew something, or had chosen not to. That night after the backyard dinner, I couldn't sleep. I started going through my mom's old things, diaries, letters, anything she had left behind. Most of it was ordinary, but then I found a note, folded into the back of a photo frame. It was written in her handwriting, short and cryptic, "He makes me uncomfortable. If anything happens to me, it wasn't just an accident." My hands shook as I read it again and again. All this time, I thought this story was about me and what happened that night with my father's friend. But what if it was bigger? What if he had been obsessed long before I ever realized? What if I wasn't the first to feel that fear? The stakes had shifted. I wasn't just holding back the truth to protect my father anymore. I was holding on to something much darker. Something that could unravel years of lies. If my dad found out, if he even suspected, how deep would that betrayal cut? Could he handle it? Or would it destroy him? And then came the final push. 2 days later, I received an anonymous envelope. No return address. Inside was a single photo, recent, taken from a distance. It was me, walking out of Daniel's apartment. On the back, in messy handwriting, it read, "You're being watched." Just like your mother was. My hands trembled as I held the photo, the chilling message burning into my mind. You're being watched. Just like your mother was. It wasn't just a threat anymore, it was a warning. And it confirmed everything I had feared but tried to ignore. Mr. Grant wasn't just crossing lines with me. He had a pattern. A history. And it went all the way back to my mother. I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer. I had to talk to my dad. No more protecting anyone. That evening, I sat him down, my heart in my throat, and told him everything. At first, he looked confused. Then concerned. Then angry, not at me, but at himself. He kept shaking his head, asking, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" But how could I explain the guilt? The fear? The way Mr. Grant had made me question my own reality? When I showed him the letter from my mom, he went pale. He recognized the handwriting. He sat quietly for what felt like forever, gripping the edges of the paper like it might disappear. Then he finally said, "Your mother, she told me once that he made her uncomfortable. But I thought she was overreacting." I never thought, his voice cracked. That was when I saw the years of denial catch up to him. All the moments he'd brushed off suddenly came flooding back. The next part happened faster than I expected. My dad didn't waste time. He called Mr. Grant over the next day under the pretense of needing help with something. I stayed out of sight, but I watched from the hallway. When Mr. Grant walked in, he acted like everything was normal. That same smug calm. But my dad didn't waste a second. He confronted him, straight to the point, no warning. At first, Mr. Grant denied everything. He laughed, said I was being dramatic, twisting things. But then my dad pulled out the note. And the photo. For the first time, I saw fear in Mr. Grant's eyes. That confrontation ended with my dad telling him to never come near our home, or me, again. It wasn't violent. No yelling. But the message was clear. The damage was done. My dad was heartbroken, not just by what I had gone through, but by the role he'd unknowingly played in keeping the door open to a man who had hurt his family. We agreed not to go to the police, not because we were protecting him, but because there wasn't enough hard proof. Just words, shadows, and pain. Weeks passed. Things slowly started to feel normal again. I was finally able to sleep, to breathe, to feel like I was living in my own skin. But then came the twist I never saw coming. Daniel, my boyfriend, the one person I thought was untouched by all this, sat me down one night and said quietly, "There's something I need to tell you. I met Mr. Grant before I ever met you." My stomach dropped. I stared at Daniel, not fully processing his words. "What do you mean you met him before me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The room suddenly felt smaller, colder. He looked genuinely nervous, almost ashamed, like he had been carrying something too heavy for too long. Daniel took a deep breath and said, "I didn't know who he really was at the time. A few months before I met you, I went to a networking event with a friend. Mr. Grant was there. He introduced himself, asked what I did, and said he might have a job opportunity for someone like me. I gave him my number. A week later, he reached out, but not for a job. He just started asking personal questions. At first, I thought he was just trying to mentor me or something. But then it got weird. He asked if I had a girlfriend, what kind of women I liked. Then one day, he showed me a photo of you and said, "She's special. You'll meet her soon." My heart felt like it stopped. He had planned it. Somehow, he had orchestrated Daniel meeting me. That's why it all felt too convenient, too smooth in the beginning. I wanted to scream, cry, run, but Daniel grabbed my hand. I didn't go along with anything. I cut him off after that. "I didn't know who you were then, but when we met later by chance, I recognized you. And I've been scared to tell you ever since." I looked into Daniel's eyes and saw honesty, fear, regret, all the things I had felt too. He had been manipulated too, in a different way. And that was when I realized just how far Mr. Grant had gone. He wasn't just a man with a dark obsession. He was someone who quietly inserted himself into the lives of others, using trust as a weapon. And he had nearly succeeded in ruining everything. But he didn't win. I didn't just survive that night or those memories, I came out stronger. My relationship with my father changed. We became closer, more honest. He apologized, not just for what happened, but for what he didn't see. That meant everything to me. As for Daniel, it took time, but we rebuilt trust. We learned to talk about the hard things, and in that process, we found something real. That night with my father's friend still makes me shiver. It left a scar, one I'll always carry. But it also opened my eyes to the importance of trusting your instincts, speaking your truth, and never letting silence protect someone else's darkness. Infidelity of trust is just as damaging as any other kind, and sometimes, it hides in places you'd never expect. This was my true story. One of betrayal, fear, and ultimately, resilience. If you've ever doubted yourself, felt unsafe around someone others praised, or kept silent out of fear, know this, your voice matters. And the truth, no matter how long it stays hidden, always finds a way to rise. 32.